The whole work session meeting for Thursday, September 19, 2019, will please come to order and the clerk will call the roll.
Calling the roll. Ms. Simon is absent today. Ms. Baker.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Tuma.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher is absent today. Mr. Schron is absent today. Ms. Conwell.
Here.
Mr. Jones is absent today. Ms. Brown.
Here.
Ms. Stevens, I'm not sure on this one. Ms. Simon was absent, and Council President Brady is also absent today. Although there is no quorum, it is still a work session.
Okay, we do not have a quorum, but we are not voting on anything today, so we are able to proceed. Has anybody signed in for public comment?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So the one item on the agenda today is the update from our consultant, Zig Berzens, on the ERP project. We have much to discuss, so please proceed.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Wonderful day outside today.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to talk about where things stand with the ERP project. So basically, I'm going to try to tell you what's up. We'll talk a little bit about the condition of the project. I think we're going to talk about the fact that the project, in essence, has stalled. What is the outlook for the project? About the project spending, and then some conclusions. So let's talk about the condition of the project. You saw this chart in the administration's report on Monday. Just wanted to basically say this is their representation of the condition of the project. Certainly green is an indication that things are okay. But when you see something red, it's serious. And there are two red boxes, if you will, on this chart. The two are basically a very high risk to the schedule. They are what causes this project to start rescheduling. It caused it 2 months ago to start rescheduling, and now that they represented and presented to you the revised schedule Monday.
Excuse me for interrupting, Zig. I'm so sorry. Is your microphone on, or can you maybe move it closer?
I have a green light. You want me to move it closer?
Yes, please.
Is this better?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Want to make sure the audience can hear.
Okay. So need to pay attention to those red indicators. You'll also see some of these orange items. Those are basically late. The team is saying that they are late, so they are a risk to the schedule as well. I think it's interesting that even though they have just rescheduled the project, some of these things in terms of getting out to the rest of the organization, I'm referring to it as organization preparation, which they talk about at the very bottom. That's the category, that those are late even now. The line items down at the bottom of the chart, those are the items that the team is carving out. They refer to it as de-scoping. I would suggest that I don't want to use that word anymore. It implies it goes away. I don't think that's true. In essence, what they're doing is they are deferring those items. They're still going to be done. They're just going to move them out. Okay? So the team in this particular page, when they presented to you on Monday, they identified for you what their major risks were that they saw to the project. I just wanted to tie these risks to what we saw on the previous chart. So when we talk about completing treasury management bank reconciliation, that's one of the blockages, one of the red boxes on the previous page. And by the way, that still is blocking going forward with bank reconciliation. And bank reconciliation is tied to the other, what I refer to as the other bundles of fiscal components that are targeted to be completed next, which has gone and moved from 10-1 to now 2-1. So there's a bundle of them: accounts payable, purchasing, cash, treasury management. Those are all bundled together. They have to actually launch together. So any kind of continuing blockage and delay on this line item could very seriously affect when it launches on 2/1. So completing the GHR refresh, I'm just simply reminding everybody that continues to be on the critical path. I mean, that has to be completed in order for open enrollment to work. Open enrollment starting mid-October approximately. Not a lot of time left. And there's been a slight delay in that, already moved it a week. Should be okay, but can't afford to be moving that anymore. Otherwise, all of a sudden, we're not going to be able to do open enrollment with this system as was done last fall. Okay, so fairly serious critical path element. The agenda manager, that testing continues to be blocked because they're having trouble getting the resources contracted in order to solve the technical problem. My understanding is that's pretty much close to being finished, that they're pretty close to having that all squared away, but to my knowledge, it hasn't been squared away yet. And then we've got this agency-wide involvement, training and communication. Those items that were on the previous page that were orange and indicating that they are late, so they are late now, even as we talk about rescheduling. Jack talked to you about the personnel loss. This is a listing that was in the report that I don't think was presented or you got a chance to see it, but I wanted you to see exactly where the shortages are. So there's 12 individuals that are needed for the ERP project that are currently not in place. They're in various stages. Some of them are, almost hired, that sort of thing. But the problem is that the hiring process is, like it or not, a relatively long, drawn-out process for the county. Okay? And if they don't get these positions addressed, then there will continue to be a shortage of resources on the project, which will continue to have an effect of stretching out the project. So the overriding risks that we just mentioned need to be addressed, and they need to be mitigated as soon as possible. There just simply isn't any more leeway, especially with the personnel side of things. So not only is the GHR refresh on the critical path, now the fiscal bundle activities are on the critical path as well. Okay? So fiscal, out of that group of 12, fiscal has been unable to fill 5 positions. That's how short they are. And that starts with the deputy chief financial officer. So that's limiting the amount of time that the county fiscal personnel can allocate to the project. So you can't wait, fiscal, just simply that portion of the project cannot wait months to hire someone, which is the kind of timeline that we're talking about here. Now, there's a natural reaction. If you can't fill the spots with personnel hires, you use contractors. Needless to say, that immediately increases the cost of the project. Something that I'm very excited about and pleased about is I attended the most recent executive steering committee meeting this week. And the executive steering committee has had everybody there, which is a good thing. And one of the things that came out of that meeting, which is exactly what the executive steering committee should be doing, is that one of the chiefs actually suggested, well, we have some resources that can fill these spots for you on a loan basis. It's exactly what should have happened. And I think that's going on right now. HHS, I think, has in essence stepped up to the plate and are offering anywhere from 5 to 12. I don't know what the numbers are. But specifically, they've got not only technical people, but they've also got fiscal personnel that can help backfill the fiscal organization, which would allow the project to continue moving forward. Does that make sense? So I think that was just a very good sign. But I got to tell you, project stalled. You know, the team, I think people are working, and they're working hard, but we just simply don't appear to be making forward steps. So the perfect storm has arrived. I've talked about this last month. In essence, the project has sailed into this perfect storm, and if we're not careful, the whole thing can capsize. So mitigating actions need to take place. They need to take place right away. And they need to be addressing the three basic pillars of any project: resources, scope, and schedule. What has happened over the last 2 years is the most common mitigating action has been extend the schedule. And now the other mitigating action has been to increase cost, okay, which you heard about on Monday. But you also heard that now they're talking about reducing the scope of what's going to be delivered on 4/1. Okay? So here are the mitigating actions that are positive, that the team is taking actions, okay? The team has set a stake in the ground. 4/1. 2020 is the stake in the ground. The team has carved out modules to be deferred to a future launch. That means beyond 4/1, okay? The team has finalized this big elephant that people have been negotiating for months, and that's the Infor Change Order 33. That, to my knowledge, has been completely finalized, and there's supposed to be signatures going on as we speak, if not today, then tomorrow, which means that it then gets on the agenda to come to the council for approval. The team, as designated, or as presented to you on Monday, has finalized about how much more money is going to be needed between now and 4/1 to complete the project, to complete the core project. Okay? I think another mitigating action is that the ESC has improved its attendance discipline, and they have reverted to weekly meetings. Okay? Now, there are still some mitigating actions that need to be done. Okay? The team's got to fill the positions needed for both fiscal and IT in the near term in order to apply resources so that the project can move forward. Certainly need to obtain the approval for a change order 33, need to obtain the approval for an appropriation increase, need to resolve the technical issues that are blocking progress. So the team recognizes, knows about it. To my knowledge, the team has escalated that particular issue, especially to Infor, so that they can get some attention from Infor to solve the technical issues. Okay?
See, I have a question. On these technical issues, I'm certainly very familiar with the bank reconciliation problem, and I'm very familiar with the agenda manager problem. But this middle item, the capability for external access to WFM, I'm not as familiar and don't seem to have seen that elsewhere. Can you explain
Okay.
what that is and where that fits in?
WFM is in essence the repository for receiving time.
Right.
Okay? And so if someone is sitting in this building and they want to access WFM with keyboard, they can do that. So they can key in their time and they can approve someone else's time. Those are actions that they can do using WFM. What they can't do right now is they can't sit at home and do it. Okay, that's the external capability. So it's an access issue, and the question becomes, you know, how much do you have to open the entire system? Do you have to open the whole system in order to accomplish external access? Not a good idea. You only want to be able to access WFM. So that's being worked And that's all I know at this point in time.
Is this item as urgent and critical as the other two?
Well, I would say yes, in the terms of,
I mean, in a longer run, it's vitally important. But I get the sense, I know that item number 1 and number 3 are immediately blocking progress on the project. And if those two aren't resolved soon, it's going to have a very, very serious effect. I'm asking whether the second one is also in that category, or whether that one's not quite as immediate and pressing as the other two.
not quite as immediate and pressing.
Okay.
It's going to tie to at what point in time do they start doing their testing? And because you definitely want to test that. And so,
Okay.
and that'll be a month or two down the road.
Okay, fine.
Okay, so again, we're talking about mitigating actions that are awaiting resolution. The team needs to focus a lot on improving its project morale. We've talked earlier about the fact that it certainly would appear that the morale is low on the project team. What I wanted to show you is an example of something that the team should be doing, and this recently occurred. And this is OBM basically trumpeting a success, and that's exactly what should be happening. That's a way of improving the morale. As you can see, these are quotes literally from an OBM email as it was published out to quite a few people. And they're basically saying, hey, we're using this thing. It's working great. We're happy. You know, it's even got an exclamation point in there. And literally, these are quotes. Okay? And they are so excited about it that they're going to be demonstrating this to all agencies on October the 8th. That's good news. So let's talk about the outlook of this project. I'd like to spend a little time on this, and I realize it's hard to see it in great detail. What you saw Monday was that chart that I opened with, which was the chart with its green and so forth, and it had the target dates over on the right-hand side, okay? What it didn't do is it didn't tell you when these things start. It didn't tell you where they were in these various line items. So you know, I have a tendency to rely more on the bar chart view, okay? So I literally restated what was in that chart into this bar chart view. But what this does is, you know, my question at the very top is, what do you see? Well, I think you'll see that there are a lot of things going on at one time. Okay, I mean, so that becomes very evident, okay, that there are quite a few things going on at one time, okay? And then the other thing is you start looking at the relationship of when things end and when things start. And, you know, at the very beginning, we have to recognize that that's where the GHR refresh critical path positioning starts coming into play. And you start seeing, oh, there it is, and it's supposed to end in October. It better. As if it doesn't end in October, we have an open enrollment question, issue, if you will. Okay, as well as testing WFM and payroll. Okay, the other thing is, you know, we need to look at is look at fiscal bundle 2. So I'm kind of referring to these things as bundles or groupings there are logical groupings that the team has put together, and I'm just calling it fiscal bundle 2. Okay, well, that has procurement and accounts payable and so forth, but you'll notice it says procurement part 1. That's the first half. That's purchase orders and requisitions in essence, okay? But if you go down to fiscal bundle 3, there's procurement part 2. That's strategic sourcing and contract management. Now, if you look at the bars, fiscal bundle 2 goes all the way out to 2.1. While you're trying to finish putting in fiscal bundle 2, you're also starting fiscal bundle 3. And the question, now we're into the, oh, you mean you're short of fiscal personnel? You see what's going to start happening? Too many things going on at one time, too much need for resources, it's going to be a problem. But you have to do this if you're going to finish fiscal bundle 2 by 4/1. Okay? I also took the second part, the second page that was presented on Monday to show you what's been deferred, what is being pushed out beyond 4/1. And we can start looking at, because the other thing it's important to recognize is not only do we have target dates out there, but we also need to recognize when it starts, because that starts showing us when do we have things going on at the same time. Okay? And you can, and I have put an arrow in here for grants management. At the time that I did this, there was some question of whether or not the fiscal organization was willing to defer grants management. I think they should. So I went ahead and put it in here. So in essence, what you're seeing is, and I'm calling this fiscal bundle 4. We have expense management, fixed assets, and grants management as being the fiscally related, fiscally oriented pieces that they can defer beyond 4/1, but that pushes them out to a September launch. If you buy the estimate that each one takes about 6 months. Okay? And to me, that's a very reasonable estimate. Very reasonable. Fiscal bundle 2, that also got pushed out. But that got pushed out, and the elapsed time for that matches what it was before, because there's been actually some work on the HR bundle too. All right? And then we've got phase 3. I'm calling these things extensions and deployment. There's a couple of interesting line items in here, but also notice that phase 3 actually overlaps. Phase 3 is going to start in January. So it actually overlaps and starts earlier than phase 2. And the reason for that is that you've got this line item in here about reporting, which is called burst. And you've also got, we need to connect EAM. We need to connect the work order subsystem to the rest of the system, which still needs to be done. Okay? And what's not on here is, you can see if you look in here, I can't find it right now, but one of the things that's listed in here is the planning and estimating for whether or not you should do version 11. And we've talked about that before. Major upgrade to the project, to the system. Okay? At best, you're looking at happening after all of this, and that's going to be down the line probably in 2022, if you even do it. And as a comment was made to me yesterday, you might even find yourself going to version 12. It's been that long since they've actually published version 11. So let's talk a little bit about cost. You have, in the Monday presentation, you had the estimate of the project team. Overall, what is the core implementation going to run the county? 32.5, round numbers, 32.5. And that was, and that was the conversation he talked about. It's going to be an additional $7 million that you're going to have to add to the appropriation. Okay, the Infor change order just being a big piece of it. Okay, but what about the rest of this? So we're saying, we're deferring X percent of this system. We're deferring it beyond 4/1, and a good portion of it's probably going to finish by September, 6 months out. What's that going to cost? So I've estimated that at $2.5 million. Okay.
Through the chair to Zig, is that an additional to the 7 or including?
Yes, it is.
No.
This whole circle, this is the whole pie. So you get the 32.5, and now I've got 2 more pieces of the pie. So I got 2.5, and I've got the totals on the next page. So I got 2.5 million for phase 2. and I got 1.4 million for what was shown to you earlier as Phase 3. Okay?
Can I ask one more other question on that? So, out of the additional that you're putting on that pie chart, is this something that is due to because everything is running behind? Is this why we have to add extra money?
It has to do with the estimates of what it's going to take in terms of resources to do the work. And we have to start at a position where we're at. And so all of the numbers and everything that I've looked at is being started at July 1 of this year. Okay, and that's what all of their numbers are and all of their estimates. And they've estimated, and that's what they used as part of the, gee, this is what we need to have from Infor, and they had resources. All I've done is move those out. Okay? That's all I've done is move those out. Plus, I've added an estimate for internal personnel, an estimate for mainsail personnel. I mean, so those, and the fact that there has been a greater use of monies than was originally thought, that's the horse is out of the barn, and that's money spent, and there's not much you can do about it. You recall there were a lot of things that were actually not included in the original budget, which has caused some of this perceived overrun. I mean, there was absolutely no indication that there was going to be a charge for internal personnel, and that was never included in the original plans. So that immediately started moving the numbers up. Am I answering your question? Okay. So when we look at this pie chart, and we see the 32.5 and the 2.5 and the 1.4, what does that mean in terms of what portion of the system we're talking about? In other words, what are we spending our money on? So I thought it'd be very interesting to take a look at this. And if you look at that whole pie, that 32.5 is 91% of the total. How many modules do you get? You get 66% of the modules. That's what you get for the 91% spending. When you look at Phase 2, that you carve out, you get a lot more bang for the buck. You get a lot more modules for not as much money. Why is that? Because many of these modules have already had work started on them. That's the reason. Okay, talent management has had work on it. Expense management had some initial startups about a year ago. So there's a position that they have that's along the way, if you will. That's why that's happening. And then Phase 3, those things haven't started yet. I mean, that's basically a 1-for-1 in terms of percentages. So the 4% gets you 3% of the modules. Okay? So let's talk about the spending. This is the chart that's got some of the details in it. So the probable cost of the original ERP scope. So we're going back to what was defined as being the ERP system 2.5, 3 years ago. All right? So if you look at this, it says the original 2016 budget to implement that system was $21 million, 21.6. There was a contingency, if you recall, and that took it to 25 million. So that's that first line. Okay, so what's the spend to date? These are numbers coming straight out of the report that you saw Monday, almost 19.5 million spending to date. The estimated amount to finish the core solution as defined on Monday was 12 million. Well, it was actually 12.8, but there were two line items in the detail that said they included contingency. It was 20% for the Infor contract, 15% for the mainsail contract. So I pulled those out so we could see the contingency. And so that's how you go from the 12.8 minus the 848 gets you to 12 million. Okay? So the total cost, I mean, it's a summation. So in essence, there's your 32.3 million that the team presented on Monday. Okay. I have contended for a while now that the county needs to be looking at this spending from the point of view that there really needs to be a contingency in there because there's been a tendency, a proven tendency over the last 2 years. Things start increasing on you, things go a little bit out of scope. Call it what you will. So that's been the track record. So in my mind, it makes sense from a projections perspective and a future look perspective that you need to add a contingency. So my suggestion is that you add a 20% contingency on that remaining balance. That's how I end up with 33.3 million. You see that under adjusted total cost of core. Okay? And then I've estimated phase 2 and phase 3. Notice that I have put a contingency in there. And it's to cover for the uncertainties which have proven to be, unfortunately, the case. So that's why I end up with 37.2 million. That's your total project in comparison to a $21 million original budget, but with contingencies of 25, the appropriation amount that you're familiar with. So I think you might be looking ultimately, before this is all over, with an additional $12 million. Now, when this is all over, when is that? That's the end of 2021, is what that's what that is. And that's separate appropriations, separate projects. And it depends on how you want to handle that. I mean, yeah, okay? But I definitely think that a $2 million activity is definitely something that should be managed as a project. So, Ms. Baker, you asked about benefits, I think, on Monday. This was the OBM's response, and I thought I'd at least present this and make sure we are aware that, in essence, the top part here is what OBM has indicated as being charges, if you will, that will continue because the project has delayed quite a bit. And but I'm just kind of highlighting for you that, in essence, that top part of that is the entire legacy environment that's supposed to be replaced. So when it's replaced, needless to say, the charges associated with it go away. That was and continues to be a potential benefit of the new system. But in essence, what's happened is this benefit has been delayed. Okay, it's been delayed about a year. And then we got the personnel numbers down below as well. They're all, so the whole idea is that these have all been delayed by about a year. And so what I'm basically saying is it's not an increased cost to the capital project itself, but it's definitely a delay or a deferral of the benefits, thus impacting your internal rate of return. And it's a sizable number. So what are my conclusions? The county has to redefine success. So and I think it's moving there. It's exactly what they're doing. But just to use sort of a home construction or a home building metaphor, you're building a house. You've got all the infrastructure. You've got the wiring and so forth in there, and the electrical and the plumbing. But some of the interior walls aren't there. The fireplace isn't there. And the patio outside isn't there yet. So your house, you can call it a success. It keeps the rain off everybody. You can actually live in it, right? You can live in it, but you may not, get the nice, warm, comfort of a fireplace. Thus, the carving out of modules into follow-on phases. That's what's going on. That's what they've done. That's what they talked about on Monday. The concern that I have is it enough? That's the concern that I have, okay? Because, we're still talking about this, we've got positions we haven't filled, we don't have all the resources, people are working hard, the morale is low, so all of these things, mean that it's going to be very difficult to try to keep those multiple activities going on at the same time, okay? So I am suggesting that the county should carve out some more, okay? That they should seriously consider deferring the second half of procurement. Okay? And the second half of procurement is strategic sourcing and contract management. Strategic sourcing, by definition, replaces buy speed. That's what it does. That's what buy speed does. It's your sourcing tool for vendors, identifying vendors and comparing them and all that kind of thing, decide who's going to get the contract and so forth. So that's what goes on. When you put in purchase orders and requisitions, which is procurement part 1, you still don't replace buy speed. So you're still going to have it there. Ergo, you have it there for 2 or 3 months until you put in procurement part 2, or you keep it there for another 6 or 7 months when you put in part 2. So I'm thinking it's a very reasonable carve out or deferral from the core implementation. So you've seen this before. It's kind of our, my representation of the system. The check marks are the things that are currently being used. Not a lot. The things that I have circled are the things that I'm suggesting need to be carved out. Now, the team has already carved out those things, with the exception of, you can see I circled contract management and supply chain management. That's the strategic sourcing contract management piece. Okay? But they've already identified that expense management should be deferred, assets, grants, and then talent management. So the team needs to carve out enough from their scope of work to ensure a successful 4-1 launch. And the smaller they make that core, the higher the probability that they will finish. Okay? If the team can mitigate the risks identified earlier within the next 2 weeks, there should be enough time to launch the first fiscal module bundle and the payroll bundle on 4-1. For first fiscal module, the first portion of the fiscal module is the fiscal 2, which is 2-1, and payroll is 4-1. And then if they carve out strategic sourcing and contract management, then I think they can probably do accounts receivable and billing by 4-1, which is what's left in fiscal bundle 3. So phase 2 would begin on 4/1/20 and require about 6 months. And then here's the list of the modules, and you'll notice at the very end I've added procurement part 2. The others, the team reported to you on Monday. So what's the budgeting effect of this additional, that I've suggested, an additional 2 modules? I think you should set up a separate and distinct project. You should change order their agreement with Infor to time and materials for that portion. The overall project effect is about $700,000. Now, again, I'm looking at that's not just the Infor amount, that's including charges for the internal personnel, main sale charges, and so forth. I mean, it's the total estimate. And it has a contingency in it, so when you go back to saying, oh, I want to kind of reduce the Infor contract, on a compensating basis, it's probably going to only be 80% of the $700,000. That would be still to do, and that's something that can be done after the fact. That doesn't have to affect your current finalization of change order 33. So that pie chart that you saw that had 2.5 million, that should probably say 3.2. Questions?
But you're saying there would be an 80% offset in the core budget.
Yes.
So
If you defer those two.
So when you're talking about that 37.2 million number, it would add a couple $100,000 to it, not 700,000.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Questions by my colleagues? Ms. Brown?
Thank you, Chairman Miller. I'm just seeking clarification on the contingency figure that you came up with. Is that proportional, or how do we come up with the 950 versus the original budget that had a $3.4 million?
Which chart are we looking at?
So I'm looking at your page 20,
Okay,
and you calculated a $956,000 contingency based on what?
what I was trying to make sure, obviously I wasn't clear enough. The 848 is actually included in the numbers that were presented to you on Monday. And the way they were included is that one of the line items indicated a 20% contingency on in-force contract, okay? And then the other one was a main sale line item that said 15% was already included in their total. I had to back that out. So I tried to identify those two, which came to the 848, okay? Then there's a balance of this 3.399 number, subtract the 848, and that balance is what needs to have a contingency against it, because I think the contingency ought to be on the entire amount, not just on the contracts, okay? I mean, certainly the contractors want to have and are happy to see a contingency associated with their contract. That means it makes it a lot easier to get additional funding. But if you actually have more people working on this project that are employees and they charge more time, that's going to increase the amount of money that goes to the contract budget. Does that make sense?
It's a little clearer to me.
Okay.
Now, the other thing that I wanted to inquire about, and this might have been better suited for the meeting we had yesterday, but as it relates to some of the benefits, I know we touched on the anticipation of staff and that. But we had, this is launched in Public Works, has been running in Public Works for quite some time. And the understanding was it would be much more efficiently run, but giving better efficiencies, I'm also guessing that would increase the workload. So has there been savings, or has it cost us more because we are able to do more, so we have to spend more money? Is my question make sense?
Absolutely, I understand. Public Works, as I discussed, with you, I think a month ago, is your other success story, okay? And it's moving along quite well. The teams and the people are happy. They're using it. They're extending the use of the system. And if you recall, when we first started talking about benefits, I was indicating to you that it's going to be a lot easier to identify benefits for Public Works because they're going from nothing to something. So they didn't have automated work orders. So now they do. They're using it, and I reported the statistics of the increased use, and they are very comfortable and very happy with the benefits that they are achieving, which they are very positive, saying that they are achieving their benefits. And that's not in any of this conversation here, okay?
Is there a financial number that someone can put on that for us?
Sure.
Maybe not you, but maybe we can get that from the
You bet.
administrative side. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
I do, I'm just, I'm referring from our meeting from Monday. The numbers that I remember in that meeting are a little different than what we're hearing now, and I just asked for a copy so I can take a look at it. But I don't remember, and maybe this is where just things are different, the 2.5 million,
That's nowhere in their report.
nowhere in their report.
The estimates for Phase 2 and Phase 3 are strictly mine. Okay, so they made no attempt to price that out at this time.
Although, from memory, I thought that the additional money of the 7 million was to take us to the end. That was not there wasn't going to be, and we'll come back later when we need more. So this is news for a change order above the 7 million that we talked about on Monday that was supposed to bring us to the end. I guess that's where I'm trying to compare the two reports
That's
here.
my understanding as well, that they have not come out and said, this is what else is going to be needed beyond 4.1, which is what I tried to estimate for you.
Okay, and also, from memory, the descoping, and I agree with you, it's deferring. So I like that word much better, because that's what we're doing, is we still need these things, we're just deferring them because we don't have the time to implement them right now. That deferral was supposed to be part of, we take it out, and so it's not costing us more, we're just deferring it. That's what I thought was happening. And there was also some serious conversation about us perhaps doing it for a less amount because we will be having less to do on the ERP setup, and that our own employees will be taking up some of the slack and be able to overcome and maybe do it for less than what we have deferred that amount to be. It's getting confusing. So where are we on all that?
To the best of my knowledge, my understanding of what was done is that, and again, we'll focus on the Infor contract because that's the big piece. There's other charges as well, but the big piece is the Infor piece. So the county, to my knowledge, negotiated with Infor to identify what the total change order would be to accomplish everything. That was a large number. Okay?
Right,
I think he showed you it started out at 4.5 million or something like that. Okay?
right,
And then they started negotiating with and they negotiated that down to an agreeable number, which was something like 3.5 or something or other.
right,
That was one of the statements. And then it came to an agreed amount that this is what's going to be agreed upon between the two for everything. Everything.
right,
Then they said, now, if we, using their term, we de-scope, and they listed the things that we're gonna de-scope, if we take those and defer them, we're gonna subtract that from the contracted amount. So they subtracted that. So
Right.
now you're talking about the net is the core solution.
okay,
So we've pushed some things out. The monies go out with it. Okay,
Right.
to whatever extent it is. And now you have this net number. That's the net number that was put into the overall estimate for the project, which drove everything to the $7 million number. Okay, so the monies that were pulled out were pushed aside, and they're just sitting there. Okay?
right,
They're just sitting there. So what will have to happen in 4.1 or something like that is, the county will have conversations with Infor, and they will say, okay, we want to go forward, we want to do these things, and this is what you pulled out of the contract, so now you're going to negotiate how much of that you're going to go ahead and contract with Infor again to continue. Okay? But those monies were not in that total. So they just sort of were set aside.
right.
Those are the numbers that I use as a basis for my 2.5 million and 1.4 million.
So if we were to enter those dollars and we don't defer or descope or however, we keep them in this project, and it's going to be done by 4.1, and everything is included, that 32 million number would be higher.
Yes. To go
Okay.
back to that number that was the starting point that they had mentioned.
And the number that I remember, and I haven't looked here yet, but I thought it was like, wasn't it like 700,000 of projects that were being descoped? And that, okay, so that 700,000, you would like to add more to that number to descope?
Yes.
And is that the 2.5? No. No. So how much more is the number that were additionally suggested to defer on top of the 700,000?
If you look at, what I did on
Page.
page 27, again, I'm looking at this thing not just from an Infor contract perspective, but in terms of total estimated looking at it, basically saying it's another 700,000. We would have to look at what they had for, procurement part 2, which is strategic sourcing and contract management. They would have a line item for those two, whatever the number is.
Right.
It's a few $100,000, I'm sure, okay? And that would then move out. Are we getting there?
Yeah, I'm just disappointed in the additional, I mean, we're already 7 million and above. Now we're another 2.5 million to get us to the finish line at this point in September of. All right, putting that aside for a minute, if you don't mind, can I? The reason that we were given why this has stalled or perhaps been delayed is because the amount of time that it took to work on the change order with Infor. That was an enormous amount of time, and it took a lot of the project manager's time away from the project. But now that that is done, we should be hopefully moving ahead without that distraction. Do you agree with that?
Certainly that was, one of the large waves in the perfect storm. I mean, there were about 20. But if the team mitigates the risks and mitigates and addresses the action items that we've talked about, they should be in a position to literally start moving forward again. And you should start seeing progress. You should start seeing weekly reports that show you progress. Nothing has changed in terms of the way I look at these things. I mean, as soon as we've got a full 1 date out there, then right away you know exactly how much work from a percentage basis needs to be accomplished between now and then. You divide it by the number of weeks. That's the pace you ought to be making every week. Every week.
Right.
And so their reports should be coming out. They should be telling you, and the number is bound to be somewhere in the vicinity of 1%. It should be moving every week. Should be making progress.
Yeah.
And like I said, the project is stalled. I mean, there has been very little progress. A lot of work, very little progress. Okay, so that's a 2-month kind of a flat period.
In the color, thanks. But I had a problem printing. Okay. The other piece that is surprising is the bank rec. I thought in our last meeting, we were very close, if not finished, with the bank reconciliation. So how does that come up as another risk?
I have been kind of monitoring this for almost 2 months. Okay, I mean, this was an issue 2 months ago.
Right.
And after a few weeks, it was, well, we'll have it solved next week. We'll have it solved next week. Needless to say, it reached the 6-week period, and that's when things got escalated. I'm well aware of the fact that project management, Jack, went straight to the top at Influence, to try to make sure the priorities were properly identified, and that all efforts were being made to solve the problem. Jack reported to you Monday. That's what he was told, and it was actually they were actually testing Monday. In other words, it was solved.
Right.
And it blew up again on Tuesday morning.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, he was just as surprised as everybody else.
So when it blows up like that, is that going back to zero, or is that just a glitch
It's
that
it's a blockage. It's basically it's saying what it is they can't access the system.
Right.
You can't access it, so you can't use it, you can't test it. And so in order for them to finish that, they have to be able to access it right now. And to my knowledge, that's still the case as of yesterday.
Really?
This is a day-to-day thing. I know that there are a lot of people that are going after this one quite hard. But until they can access the system consistently and for a longer period of time, rather than having to blow up, fix it, start again, and blow up. That's what needs to be solved, and that's why it's literally listed as a blockage. Cannot finish user acceptance testing, can't do that, can't launch the system.
Well, that explains that. Okay. If I may, on page 7, where you have your key ERP people in 5 months, the loss, I know we had 5 we were reported in fiscal and 3 were in IT. So where are we in these, and is there any progress? Can you give us any updates of any of these people? If they're close to hiring, if they're in the process of hiring, or anything here?
I can only tell you what I heard in the executive steering committee. Okay, so in the executive steering committee, this was addressed, this was discussed, and there was an update that, I don't know the details very well, other than there are several people who are in the throes of getting an offer. Others are in the process of they're receiving resumes. Some are just now starting with the actual personnel requisition. So I don't know how that works out with preciseness, and I don't know which ones either. That was not discussed. I think, for instance, that the deputy CFO is a person who left, I think, 2 months ago. That individual was originally hired to be dedicated full-time to this project. That individual never worked full-time on this project. Got pulled onto other things.
Right.
So I'm sitting there thinking, well, you need people associated with the project that are going to be decision makers that can call it when it's necessary without going through a long, drawn out, let's meet, review, and discuss, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which is what that person was supposed to do. Okay, because deputy CFO means that they are experienced, talented, knowledgeable, understand the way things are, the way things should be, and so forth.
Right.
So if that position should be filled as quickly as possible, and that position should be dedicated to this project for the next 8 months. Period. End of story. Then I think, you start addressing, you mitigating some of those risks. Oh, did I turn it off? How'd I do that?
That's it for now.
So I have a question and a summary that I'd like to check with you. The question, and it follows up on Ms. Baker's line. As I recall, the amount of the de-scoping, to use Infor's term, because we're going to refer to their contract, it took out of the core contract something like $700,000 or so. But the amount that was added in, if you count phase 2 and phase 3, we're not going to count the 700,000 for the payroll part 2. That's speculative. Just phase 2 and phase 3 comes out to 3.9 million. 2.5 plus 1.4. I know that part of the reason why that's more than the 700,000 that came out of the Infor contract is that not all of the required work is Infor's work. There's other work.
Correct.
But it doesn't seem that would account for the difference between 700,000 and 3.9 million, or does it?
Well, clearly, I think it does. Otherwise, I wouldn't have estimated that number. But there's a lot of work beyond Infor's work. And if I can show you something that I did not highlight for you, and I probably should. Oh, it doesn't show here. Oh, where is it? Hang on a second. What I did in the projections, it doesn't show up in the color. I apologize. What I tried to show in the bar chart is I highlighted the areas that are not Infor services. okay? And in phases 2 and 3, the number of line items that are not in for services is far greater than the number of line items that are in for services, okay?
So then let me ask you this. Will there be any offset of non-in-force services out of the core that would offset some of that difference between the 700,000 and the 3.9 million?
Possibly. I'm not sure if I've thought through that one.
Because otherwise it appears that the deferral adds a considerable amount of overall cost to the project, and the administration was telling us, "Oh no, it's going to be essentially equivalent." But from what you're telling us, unless there's a considerable offset of non-in-for costs from the core, that it's going to substantially increase the cost to do the deferral.
I think you're right. I think there may be some that would move out from core and into the other two phases. Not sure it's going to be significant because some of those were already going to be afterward. Like, for instance, rolling out to all the agencies, rolling the general ledger out to the agencies, those were all going to be out there anyway. You know, so there's some activities like that. The whole rolling out of reporting, those were already post go live, second phase activities. So it won't be as much as you might think.
Okay. The second part is that I have a list of 5 items that I'm watching over the next month, and I want to see if these are the right items, to see if we're making progress. Number 1 is the GHR refresh, which is supposed to be done live on 9/27, which is a week from tomorrow. The second one is fixing the treasury problem. The third one is getting the agenda manager and the mess with Highland and that business resolved. We're watching border control agendas to see if that comes back. And the fourth is the external access to WFM. And the fifth is filling the fiscal staff positions, either by hiring or loaning positions, however that gets done, to see if that gets done and to what extent. So those are the things that I'm watching over the next month. Are those the right things?
Those are good ones. I would add one more. I would add, because the team sends you their weekly reports. You get those, okay?
Right.
Should be getting them on the Monday following the week.
Which we
Okay.
don't, but
Should be getting
Should.
them on the Monday following the week. And I think it's important that somebody holds their feet to the fire and basically says, are you or are you not maintaining pace? I
okay.
mean, the project is stalled. You know, we've seen the history over the last 2 weeks. I mean, if you look at the weekly reports, the last one, I think you just received one for 8/23.
Well,
They were all red. I mean, they were all, they were a problem.
I implicitly watched that, and Nan does too. Nan noted that there was lots of red, and I noted that the total number of tasks completed for the last week was 0.
Yeah.
So between those two, those were a strong indication that we're not on track.
And I would add the percent complete.
Right.
I would, because they do report that. I mean, it's in there every week, and from their
The
master
percent
plan.
complete did not change. It
And
remained
it
at 63.
And it should. I mean,
Yeah.
because at least, a half to a 1%. I mean, moving forward, I mean, Something has to happen.
Now, the one thing I'm finding encouraging is that the number of tasks is not changing. You know, we had this for a while where where you'd make some progress, but then they'd add new tasks, which changed the denominator. But I think it's looking to me like they've hopefully got all the tasks identified, so that hopefully we have a stable base to work from and to measure if we're making progress.
Pretty
So,
much, yeah,
so-
pretty much. The only thing you need to watch out for
Otherwise, they would be
is
asking
whether or
for
not
higher.
they are, given that they're gonna carve these things out, there may be a thought on their part that, well, let's just delete those tasks from the plan. You know, and as soon as you delete those tasks in the plan, given the way that they are looking at it, your percent complete will jump arbitrarily.
Right. Councilman Toomer's next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So hearing about these additional costs necessary to complete this project, these additional phases, and whether they're paid now or whether they're paid later, I mean, this is pretty much like what they say, a fait accompli, right? I mean, it's going to happen. So council is really, with respect to authorizing expenditures on the project, we really have our hands tied, because in order to get this thing done, it's going to require the additional funding. So, I mean, would you agree with that statement? There's really not, we can't really say, well, no more here. I mean,
The only thing that I think would affect it, I mean, and again, the team needs to come up with whatever they think their estimates are going to be, I mean, in terms of details. I mean, I did it at a very high level, but the way you agree to go forward is going to have a significant impact on what you have left to spend. You know, so that's going to become a question of, I mentioned earlier, if you're going to go forward, you probably want to go time and materials, okay, with your contractor, okay? If you do that, you don't necessarily have to have as much project management time on their part, because you're now managing it, all right? So that tends to cut back on it, okay? If it's time materials, you can suggest that somebody is only here for a week and then they take off and go do something else, as opposed to sticking around. So there's a variety of ways where that tends to come down a little bit, okay? So certainly you can, in many cases, you can hopefully by then, we're talking about April and June timeframe of 2020, I mean, that's almost a year from now.
right.
Should have some internal personnel hired, you know, especially on the IT side. And if you have IT side personnel hired, you don't need the main sale people, so now you're paying, well, what, about half of what you know, so all these numbers can be controlled and can be reduced, but I had to go with what, you know, the high-end number is much more meaningful in terms of setting expectations than to sit there and say, well, this is the low end and now we'll come back and change it up. I'd rather start up here and change it down.
Right, so there's incentive to get people in permanent positions in IT to get,
Absolutely.
be able to handle this stuff,
Absolutely,
so.
as well as filling the fiscal positions.
Right,
You bet. I mean, even though HHS has been wonderful in terms of loaning some personnel, I mean, certainly fiscal wants to have their own personnel, as they should. And they've got time now to do that, but that means they need to get the employment requisitions out there, and they need to start the process. If it takes 6 months, let it take 6 months.
okay, appreciate it,
Does that
thank you.
help?
Yeah, it does, I mean, there's gonna be an amount out there, but it seems like with respect to the administration, they have some flexibility in trying to squeeze that amount down if they take the steps necessary to
Certainly.
do so.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Baker.
So, Zig, as our consultant, I understand why it is that you want to take a very realistic view of what more it could cost us, but is there any, I mean, what credibility is there when we're told that 6.9 million is what's needed to get us to the end of the project, and that 700,000 of that is being deferred, and that we are at a place where it will be finished? Why wouldn't we hold the feet to the fire for the 7 million that was told by those that are running this project with the additional 700,000 for reporting, I mean, these are reporting type of things that are after the project anyway, why not just, you know, say that that is what the number's going to be and not, I mean, we've been surprised before and the price could go up and chances are it will, but at this point in the game, we haven't even authorized the 7 million yet. Why wouldn't we just stay with that number and say, this is what collectively you have all agreed to, Infor, project manager, those that are counseling, that's the number that we were told. Why not just stay with that number and say that's what's gonna get us there?
We need to remember that the 700,000 that you're referring to is in for contract money. Okay, it's not the total cost, okay? So, you know, they have said, oh, we've deferred this portion of the in-for contract, but now you've got to say, well, wait a minute, what about mainsail? Oh, what about the employees that are working on this that are charging every week, they're charging to the project number? You know, those are all part of this whole estimate. What about, you know, any kind of software licenses or additional charges of DOIT personnel? So there's this big long list of all these charges that are not included in that conversation about, oh, we're moving 700,000 out. It's a lot more than that.
From the conversations that I remember, and Councilman Miller can tell me if I'm wrong, that 700,000 was probable it was going to be less, because we were going to be able to use the people that we already had, the skills that we had obtained, and that we wouldn't even need Infor for some of those things, because we're gonna be able to assume much of that work. So that 700 was a maximum amount. Isn't that what you remember hearing, Councilman Miller? That was
For the in-for contract,
yeah,
for the in-for contract,
right.
as opposed to mainsail, DOIT charges of personnel, you know, fiscal people working on the project. I mean, there's a litany of items that also are going to be incurred that are part of the capital spending for the next piece.
To answer your question, Ms. Baker, I think you spoke accurately about what they presented regarding the in-for charges that would be incurred in the follow-on work, as opposed to trying to accomplish it all before April 1. However, they said very little about what would be required outside of Infor, and I think that part is in question.
Is that just an omission? Was that, I mean, why wouldn't you include those charges? If we're talking about charges, why not include the, you know,
Again, I don't think that they were focused on identifying what the additional charges are down the road. That's why I thought it would make sense to do that, to establish expectations so that folks are not surprised. So I just don't think that they consider that to be something that they needed to focus on, because they needed to focus on getting an understanding of what additional funds from a contractual basis need to be put in place, because, you know, the Infor contract could very easily run out on everybody soon,
right?
as can the spending against the appropriation of 25 million can run out soon. That's somewhere potentially in October. You know, so there's a lot of pressure on their part to get things
Get that
squared away, at least for what they think they can accomplish by 4/1.
All right.
Well, perhaps they wanted to provide a clear and visible opportunity for ZCO to add value by doing that analysis, which was most helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
And that, if I may, that change order, that descoping was 791, so it's almost an $800,000 descope.
Ms. Brown?
I just want to get some clarity. We've been talking a lot about this additional figure that wasn't presented to us, and it's not as if there's nobody here from the administrative side that can add clarity. Would it be appropriate? I would like to hear from Jack if he can just confirm what it is that we're asking. Will this be an additional charge or not? Would you
Well,
mind?
yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
With respect to the additional charges, I appreciate the opportunity to at least offer what our intent was in presenting on Monday. We did not specifically make an attempt to estimate the stuff that I had in phase two in detail. There is an intent, the statement that Ms. Baker made is true. And what I think it accurately reflects what I thought I said on Monday, which was that we intend to use as many internal resources as we can. Obviously, we don't have those resources on board right now, but the intent is to try to keep the cost down by doing that. Also looking at alternative contracting methods. We may go to more of a time and materials hourly basis where we have very strict structured control over when people are on site, when they're not, those kinds of things. So we can take those kind of measures to reduce that down. I would say that the $2.5 million is certainly something that I would probably challenge, and I'd want to certainly not taking Zig to task at all. I think he did a maximum estimate of some kind, but we need time to take that and properly estimate it so we could put the numbers in front of you. I would expect not to be at that level. Okay.
So,
I also didn't. I thought I made it clear that, and apparently I didn't, that the budget allocation or the additional budget allocation was just what it would take to get through 4-1. So my apologies if that wasn't clear.
Ryan,
Yes, sir.
no apology is necessary. We did not specifically ask you for a cost estimate all in for phase two and phase three. However, we're going to do that now.
Okay.
So please work up your best estimate of the all-in cost for phase two and phase three and let us know.
Yeah, we'd planned to do that. We just didn't have that detail.
We
by the time got
understand.
there.
That's no problem.
Would I-
But
Clarification, April 1st was supposed to be the end of the project, April 1st. And then we decided that deferring a few things because we can't make it to April 1st, we decided to defer. So that's where the 700,000 came in to make up for that. And I believe September was the date to give that timeline. So where does phase two and phase three? I mean, phase one was supposed to end the project on April 1st. And then there was some post work to be done, but I don't remember having more money invested after April 1st. I thought descoping was identified and okay, but where does the extra $2, $3, $4 million come from that's in addition to the 32 million and the extra 700,000? I'm not quite sure where.
Those are Zig's estimates. We haven't validated any of those
But
numbers.
even in your, just what you said just now, that we don't agree, but there is probably going to be more, where does that more come from if the project was to end April 1st and we are deferring 700 or 800,000? Where does this other, why is there more money now needed on top of that at all? I guess is what I thought 32 million was the number, or 33 by the time you had 700 back in.
Councilman Miller, if I may, I don't want to, because this was my question originally.
Good.
If,
Sure, I'm
Okay.
questions out there.
and the clarification that I was looking for was actually made, and if I understood your response correctly, you don't have that figure or timeline in front of you because you are still looking to try to see how you can mitigate some of those dollars that Zig so diligently, and we appreciate his estimate, put together. So we don't have that information, but it was, I think, for this body, a little bit misleading, if you will, for lack of a better word, that we didn't anticipate those charges coming forth. So I understand if you don't have the timeline or that estimate put together, but it was an unexpected incurred expense based on the report that we received on Monday. So I just wanted to get clarification on that. I thank you for sharing that. So there will be additional costs. We just have not itemized that. And I thank you, Zig, for the work that you did to help us understand that we can anticipate additional costs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to respond to what Ms. Baker said about, we thought April 1 was supposed to be the end of it. And I think that the other really important point that Zig brought to us today is that that deferral is a better description than descoping, because what we did was we eliminated some items from the core project. The idea is that we want on April 1 to have a complete installation in terms of the essential things that are needed to have an overall project up and running and in operation. But we also decided that the items that we took out of the core project have not been entirely eliminated, but they have been deferred to later phases. And so the additional cost is going to come in, the amount yet to be determined, but the additional cost is going to come in doing those additional items. So it's somewhat of a semantical question. Yes, we're going to have a core installation completed if all goes well on 4/1, so that we're going to have a complete system. But then we're also going to add some bells and whistles in phase 2 and phase 3 to complete some of the additional elements that were in the original design and that we still want, but we decided that they're not essential to the core initial installation. So that's
Yeah.
my read
The
on
only
it.
thing I'm concerned though about is that as we defer and take out of the core project, that's money that this project was supposed to have in it. So we don't, accepting to have more money needed outside of what we're taking out of the initial project is different. I mean, that's just adding more to the project, money-wise, and not getting it. I mean, if we were to say today, we want this entire project done by 4/1, no descoping, no deferring, the amount of money that we're gonna pay is the 32 whatever, that would be an all-inclusive number. There wouldn't be more added to it. So why is it because we're taking it out and deferring it, that 32 million should go down then? It should go down in price because we've taken tasks out of there that we're not gonna do now and we're deferring it to later. Just like that 700,000 lowered the price. If we're gonna lower the price another million or so, then that 32 million should come down to 31 million. Because that was part of the initial overall project price. I mean,
I don't argue with that.
but it
that
looks like
was,
we're
that
going that
was-
way. It looks
that
like
was
we're-
that was the gist of my question when I was saying well, how much non-infor related expenses can be offset out of the core to make up a good part of that difference between the 800,000 de-scoping and the 3.9 million estimate on the phase 2 and phase 3. I agree with that, but I also think that it's the right strategy to complete a core installation on 4.1, and I think if we were to try to do all of the elements by 4.1, that we would have too many different elements trying to get done at the same time, and I don't think it would get done, and it would throw off the whole thing and probably add to the cost. So I don't think that'd be a good idea.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I could, I mean, it's not like this project hasn't been going on for a very long time. I mean, I don't see any reason why this shouldn't be done by April 1st. I don't see any reason at this point. I mean, the way it was explained to council was that there was a deadline, and then there would have to be some continuing maintenance of the what do you call it? Help me out here, the programs or whatever, the computer programs. And you would need some assistance with respect to the computer programs until the county could essentially do it themselves. So, you know, I mean, I still think April 1st should be a set deadline of trying to get this thing done. And, I mean, I don't want to be here on April 2nd doing this. I mean, this is just, you know, it's like pulling my hair out. I mean, it's just a very frustrating thing, I think, for council to go through. And I mean, there's been a lot of progress, and I'm hoping that this is really good for the county. I'm sure it will be. Otherwise, you know, we wouldn't be authorizing the funding for this, the expenditures. But I mean, there's got to be an end date. There's got to be an end date. It's just, you know, I mean, when you, I don't want to, you know, I mean, when you go into battle somewhere, there's got to be an end date in sight, and you leave a few troops behind, and you get out. I mean, at some point, we got to get out of here. It's got to end.
Anything else?
I just think it's important before we leave here that we don't call this de-scoping anymore. Because if we're taking things out and it's being charged later and we're paying $2 or $3 million more than the project was to begin with, I agree we can't get it done by 4/1. But in theory, if we did demand for it to be done by 4/1, this would be the price. This would be the price. This would be 32 million plus the 700,000 put back in there. That would be our price. So why are we adding more dollars after 4/1 just because we're allowing it to be extracted from the project now to do later? That's all I'm saying, is that we really need to be careful, I think, of the language that we're using, that we're taking these dollars should be reduced in the core project because we're putting them in later, not keep the core project the same and then still adding more. That's an added cost. That's not a deferment. That's not a de-scoping. That's just more money to do what we thought was going to be included to begin with. And the only reason why we're changing right now is because we can't get it done within the 4/1 deadline. But I just think we need to be careful with this money. If it's more money, it's more money. Let's call it that. The project cost us more. But let's not call it a de-scoping, because these things should be done by 4/1 and can't be. That's,
So-
if I'm trying to,
So what you're saying is if you take the 32.5 million and you add the 800,000
Back
that was going to be deferred, bringing you to a total of 33.3, that the total cost for the whole thing should be at or very, very close to that number.
that's right. That's what we were told. I thought that's what we were told at the time. And there was no conversation that, no, you're not done yet. The project's going to need more money because we can't do it within the amount of money that's been given. That's not what I remember. I thought we were done April 1st. We're allowing for some deferment because it's the practical thing to do, but it wasn't supposed to cost us more. That was the number. And that's where I'm saying we need to be careful. If it costs us more, let's say it costs us more. If it's deferment, let's say it's deferment. That means that we extract it out and we put it over here, and that number goes lower because we took it out. And
Okay,
there's a difference in language here that we need to be careful as we move forward.
so what we're gonna want Mr. Ryan to do for us is, number one, as we said, to give us his estimate of what the cost for phase 2 and phase 3, and also to figure out for us what the total amount is, not just the 800,000 that we subtracted from the Infor project, but what's the total amount that we're going to be able to subtract from the core cost because we deferred those items to the later time.
Yeah, I understand the ask, and again, there was no intent to misrepresent that in the language that I used there. Sounds like the primary thing that when I said this is the appropriation amount, I did not include the deferred, almost $800,000 amount in there. I thought the way I explained it, that was clear, but apparently it was not. So we'll make sure we're clear all the way through those items when we do the estimate.
We're not complaining about anything, except for that we don't want to spend more money if we don't have to.
Absolutely.
But we're just trying to get a very precise set of questions going forward so that we can really nail down what the total costs are going to be for the new time schedule.
Yes, sir.
Including both the core project and the follow-on phases.
Okay.
Okay?
Can I, on a different note, if possible, could I add some clarifications that's information that Zig did not have before his brief today that I got? First of all, on this bank reconciliation hot issue that we have had a large, high level, if that's the right word. We've escalated this issue into Infor. They believe they've identified a specific problem, and the specific problem is that, without diving into a technical detail too deep here, they know exactly where the problem occurs. There is the ability to use the web client to do all this work. The rich client, which sits on a PC and actually runs from there, is where the problem occurs. We should be able to resume testing, and we could, if we needed to, we could go live without the rich client. So I think we have a solution to this one. We're obviously going to be testing it this week. So we've been there before a couple of times with them, but this really sounds like they've nailed it. They put the A-team on this on their side.
Okay, that's good, that's good. Okay.
Yeah, that is good news. So this has been a long-standing problem. It took a long time to track down. It was complex. The second thing is that regarding the Highland Northwoods issue, it all boils down to they just need to sign a termination agreement that we'd already sent over to them in form. I think the council members had seen this. And we've had conversations with them back and forth. I do expect to get that back this week. I think I'd said that earlier, maybe on Monday. I still expect that. It's not like we're not talking. We're in separate corners. I think this is going to get resolved. It's a simple matter of trying to get the right person on their side to just sign that document.
So can we get that signed tomorrow and get the agenda item walked on Monday onto the Board of Control?
I would love to get it signed tomorrow. I'm not the one doing the signature. I will do my best. We've already had, our law department's already called them and communicated with them today. So we're hoping we can get through that. Yes, sir.
Councilwoman Brown.
Mr. Chair, I just want to follow up. So you're going to give us a cost breakout of the things that were deferred or descoped as a savings, or how is that going to come to us? I just want clarification.
I'm not sure what the right mechanism is, to be honest with you. We'll first I need to put that together, and then whatever the appropriate presentation is, we'll make that happen. We won't have to wait, obviously, you should not be waiting to the next bi-monthly presentation to do that. So we'll make sure we get that to you in whatever form the council wants.
Okay, and the other thing is, I thought I was under the impression we were making payments based on percentage to completion. So if what we're experiencing are all these delays and we're not completing the task, I'm not sure how we are continuing to exceed our expenses if the work is not being done to am I not clear on that?
Well, you've got about 3 questions in there. I'm not sure which one to answer first.
Percentage
Just
to
in terms
completion
of
regarding
how
payment.
we're-
Let's
how we're
start
making
there.
payments. Well, we are, the change order that we're putting in front of council, once we get all the last pieces put together here, we're almost done, has payment by deliverables, not and within those deliverables, there can be a percent complete for a deliverable. If it's a big deliverable, maybe we're 50% done. So the agreement says, we'll look at those and we'll evaluate those jointly with Infor each month, and that we'll going forward, when we get invoiced, it'll be for those things that have been completed. It's not a percent complete over the overall project. It's very deliverable specific going forward. In the past, there's been some confusion around that with previous change orders. I know that there's been some discussion with my predecessor here about that. We're going to remove that confusion. It's deliverables based going forward.
Deliverables. Okay, so I think this council would like to see that as well.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, there's wording in the change order that deals with that, and there's a specific list of detailed deliverables, which we have, and which we're making sure that our list of deliverables matches Infor's and so forth, just to make sure we're all synced up that way. I don't expect a problem with that. So.
Okay, and again, so the again, semantics and the deliverables versus percentage to completion has caused us some additional expenses, so I don't know if we need to tighten up the language, but it was just a concern of mine as we have this conversation.
And I think going forward, I think we've taken we've taken a great deal of time to make sure we've taken the confusion out of any contract language. So we've had our law department looking at this in detail, among many other folks.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and I want to again thank Zig for all of his hard work in bringing some of these matters to the forefront for us. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Ryan, I would like to suggest a date of September 30th for the cost information that we discussed. Is that a reasonable timeline to do that?
Yeah, I think so. We can certainly work toward an estimate of that. My only caveat would be we're going to be working on several different ways that we can get the cost down, so we can do an estimate by September the 30th.
Okay, fine.
All right.
It'll give us something to start with. It doesn't.
Yes, sir.
It doesn't have to be the final answer.
Okay.
It can be an initial answer.
All right.
Okay. Anything else, my colleagues? Okay. We thank you very much for your presentation and for all the work you've done for us. Any miscellaneous business? Hearing none, nothing further calls our attention, so we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.